What happens when a neighborhood rule enforcer goes too far, pepper spraying a woman at her own pool, only to find out her husband just returned from the army? "Ma'am, do you live here?" The words cut through the quiet buzz of kids splashing in the water and the soft chatter of parents stretched out on lounge chairs. It was a late Saturday afternoon in Plano, Texas, the kind of day where the sun clung to the sky a little longer, painting everything in a golden glow. Families were winding down, teenagers were gathered in small circles, and the neighborhood pool smelled faintly of chlorine mixed with sunscreen. But in that peaceful mix of normal sounds and smells, Sharon Whitfield stood with one hand planted firmly on her hip and the other gripping her oversized tote bag, glaring at the woman who had just walked in. That woman was Monica Reed, 42 years old, wearing a light sundress with a towel slung casually over her arm. She had her pool pass tucked into her bag, ready if anyone at the desk asked, though she already knew the gate system had scanned her correctly when she entered. She lived in this neighborhood, paid her HOA dues like everyone else, and all she wanted was a couple of hours of peace before heading back home to prepare dinner. But Sharon blocked her path. "I asked you," Sharon repeated louder this time. "Do you live here?" Monica blinked, a little startled by the sudden interrogation. Around her, heads began to turn. A young boy climbing out of the pool stopped mid-step, dripping water onto the pavement. Two women on lounge chairs adjusted their sunglasses, pretending not to stare but clearly listening. "Yes, I live here," Monica replied evenly, her voice calm. "I'm at 2780 Willow Glen. My keycard worked at the gate. Is there a problem?" Sharon's lips curled into a thin smile. "Sometimes people sneak in. You don't look familiar." Monica's brow furrowed. "What do you mean by that?" Instead of answering directly, Sharon shifted her stance, squaring her shoulders like a security guard who had just spotted a threat. "I'm on the HOA board. It's my responsibility to make sure only residents use this pool. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to see some ID. Proof of address." The words hung in the air, heavier than the humid Texas heat. Monica's fingers tightened around the towel in her hand. She hadn't done anything wrong. She hadn't broken any rule. And yet here she was, being cornered at the entrance as though she was trespassing. "Are you serious?" Monica asked, her voice still calm but laced with disbelief. Sharon didn't budge. "Dead serious. If you live here, you shouldn't have a problem showing me." A murmur rippled across the pool deck. A father with his young daughter whispered something under his breath. Another woman quietly took out her phone, holding it low near her lap, as though preparing to record just in case this went somewhere ugly. Monica inhaled slowly. She thought about just pulling out her wallet and flashing her driver's license. It would be the fastest way to shut this down. But why should she? Why was she being singled out when others walked freely past Sharon without so much as a glance? Her patience thinned. "Look, I don't owe you anything," Monica said firmly. "If the HOA wants to check ID, they can have a rule for everyone. Not just me. Not just today." The firmness in her tone caught Sharon off guard, but only for a second. Then her jaw tightened, and her hand disappeared into her tote bag. "What are you reaching for?" Monica asked cautiously. A man sitting near the shallow end muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." When Sharon pulled out a small black canister and held it at her side, several people around the pool gasped. It was pepper spray. Monica's heart pounded. "You need to put that away," she warned, her voice low but steady. "This is going too far." Sharon's voice rose, echoing across the pool deck. "If you don't leave right now, I'll use it. You're not supposed to be here, and I don't care what excuse you give me." Silence fell, except for the sound of kids treading water. Every eye was locked on the two women. Monica stood her ground, clutching her towel, while Sharon's knuckles whitened around the spray canister. The tension was suffocating. A single wrong move could tip the entire scene into chaos. People were frozen in place, waiting to see who would move first. But before anyone could act, Sharon took a sharp step forward, lifting the canister higher. The standoff had only just begun. The poolside silence shattered with Sharon's sudden movement. Her arm jerked upward, the pepper spray canister gleaming under the fading Texas sunlight. Conversations that had once filled the air were replaced by a collective gasp. Kids clung to the edge of the pool, sensing something serious, but not quite understanding what they were seeing. Parents shifted nervously in their seats, caught between disbelief and fear of becoming part of the unfolding confrontation. Monica didn't flinch. Her eyes locked on Sharon's hand, every nerve in her body telling her to back away, but her pride anchoring her in place. She had lived in this neighborhood for nearly 6 years, paid her HOA dues every month, walked these sidewalks, waved to neighbors, grilled in her backyard. And now, here she was, accused of not belonging in front of people who knew exactly who she was. "Sharon, put that down," Monica said firmly, her tone carrying the authority of someone who had been forced to defend herself too many times. "I'm doing my job," Sharon snapped back, her face tightening. "You people think you can walk in anywhere." She caught herself, but the slip had already burned through the crowd like gasoline to a flame. A sharp whisper came from the lounge chairs. "Did she just say what I think she said?" Someone else muttered, "Oh, no." Not again with her Monica's chest heaved as she fought to keep her composure. She raised her voice so everyone could hear. "I live here. I have nothing to prove to you." The man near the shallow end, still in his swim trunks, stood up now. "She's telling you she's a resident." "You need to back off, Sharon. Nobody asked you to play cop." But Sharon only doubled down. She aimed the pepper spray a little higher, finger brushing the trigger. Her voice rose, shrill, defensive. "If she really lives here, why can't she just show ID and settle this? Why make such a big deal unless she's hiding something?" The words stung Monica, not because they were true, but because she recognized the tactic. Doubt. Accusation. Painting her as a liar while Sharon played the role of protector. It wasn't about rules. It was about control. Monica's voice cracked slightly under the weight of anger she tried to contain. "Because I don't owe you my dignity just to sit by the pool." A small chorus of support erupted around her. "That's right. Leave her alone. This is ridiculous." Phones were raised higher now, their tiny red lights blinking as more people started recording. Sharon turned toward them, flustered. "Are you seriously filming this? Do you all want strangers using your pool? You'll thank me later when I keep this place safe." Safe. The word echoed in Monica's mind, twisted and bitter. Safe from her? From a neighbor walking in with a towel? She took one slow step forward, careful not to make any sudden movement. "You're going to regret this," Monica said softly, her voice carrying both a warning and a plea. "Please don't make this worse." The air felt heavy, as if everyone present was holding their breath. Sharon's grip tightened, her finger flexed. A teenager at the deep end whispered to his friend, "She's really gonna do it." And then, in one reckless burst of rage, Sharon raised the canister directly at Monica's face. Time slowed. Monica's instinct screamed at her to turn away, but her pride rooted her. She refused to give Sharon the satisfaction of seeing her retreat. A woman from across the pool shouted, "Stop!" A child began crying, the sound sharp against the tension. Sharon's voice, shaky but loud, cut through it all. "Last chance! Show me your ID or get out!" Monica clenched her fists, her throat tightening. She was cornered in her own neighborhood, under the watchful eyes of her neighbors, treated like an intruder in the place she had every right to be. Her silence became its own form of defiance. And that silence was too much for Sharon. With one quick press, the hiss of pepper spray burst into the air. The crowd erupted. Screams, shouts, the splash of someone jumping into the water in shock. Monica stumbled back, clutching her eyes, her towel dropping to the concrete. "Are you out of your mind?" a man yelled, rushing forward. Another woman sprinted to Monica's side, fumbling for bottled water to flush her eyes. Phones recorded every angle. Sharon's arm still trembled in the air, canister raised like a weapon, her expression a mix of triumph and sudden doubt. But as Monica's cries echoed and neighbors closed in around her, the weight of what just happened was only beginning to settle. The sharp hiss of the pepper spray seemed to hang in the air long after Sharon's finger had released the nozzle. The acrid scent drifted across the pool deck, stinging the nostrils of anyone standing too close. But for Monica Reed, the burn was immediate and searing. Her hands shot to her face, tears streaming uncontrollably as she tried desperately to blink away the pain. "My eyes! Oh my God, my eyes!" she cried out, stumbling backward into one of the lounge chairs. Her knees buckled, and she half fell, half collapsed onto the concrete. Gasps and screams erupted around the pool. The idyllic Saturday scene was shattered. Parents grabbed their children, pulling them close. Phones tilted higher, capturing every second. A man rushed over with a water bottle, unscrewing the cap with frantic urgency. "Here, tilt your head back. Keep your eyes open," he instructed, pouring water over Monica's burning eyelids. Another woman knelt beside her, fanning the air with a towel. "Just breathe, honey. Just breathe. You're gonna be okay." Through the sting and blur, Monica could barely make out faces. All she could feel was the fire spreading across her skin, the humiliation of being attacked in front of neighbors, the sheer disbelief that this was happening in her own community pool. Meanwhile, Sharon stood frozen in place, arms still outstretched, the canister dangling in her hand. The confidence that had carried her just seconds ago drained from her expression, replaced by something tight and defensive. Her eyes darted between the bystanders, noticing their glares, their whispers, their judgment. "She assaulted her!" someone shouted. "That's a crime!" another added. Sharon's lips pressed together. I told her to leave. She refused. I was protecting the neighborhood." Her voice cracked, and even she didn't sound convinced anymore. The man helping Monica turned his head sharply toward Sharon. "Protecting us from what? A woman in a sundress with a towel? You've lost your mind." The crowd's energy shifted from shock to anger. Phones weren't just recording anymore. They were being waved in Sharon's direction like evidence, each lens capturing her every twitch. A teenage boy muttered, "She's done." "This is going everywhere," Monica coughed, spitting out the metallic taste that pepper spray always seemed to leave. Her voice was hoarse but steady as she managed to whisper, "You didn't have to do this." Her words pierced through the noise, quiet but heavy, and several people fell silent just to hear her. The woman kneeling beside her brushed her arm gently. "Don't try to talk, sweetheart. We'll get help." Sharon took a step back, shaking her head. No, she's exaggerating. She's fine. Look at her, she's sitting up." But the collective stares around her told a different story. Nobody was siding with Sharon anymore. Then came the voice of a middle-aged man who had been sitting quietly near the pool gate until now. He stood, pointing directly at Sharon. "I've seen you harass people before, but this is assault. Somebody call the police." Several people immediately pulled out their phones. Within seconds, you could hear someone already speaking into their receiver. "Yes, Plano Community Pool. There's been an assault." A woman was pepper sprayed. Sharon's chest rose and fell rapidly. She glanced at the gate, as if considering leaving, but she knew it was too late. Too many witnesses, too many cameras. Running would only seal her guilt. Monica sat hunched forward, trembling, while water continued to pour over her face. Every breath came in shallow gasps, but she kept repeating, "I live here. I live here." The phrase wasn't for Sharon anymore. It was for herself, a desperate anchor to remind her she belonged, despite what had just happened. Sharon muttered under her breath, "You people always play the victim." The poolside erupted. "Enough!" someone shouted. "Stop talking!" another woman snapped. "How dare you say that after what you did?" The energy was reaching a boiling point, neighbors pressing in closer, their outrage palpable. Sharon tried to stand taller, clutching her bag against her chest like armor. "I was just following rules. That's all." "No," the man near the shallow end said firmly, stepping forward so his shadow loomed over hers. "You weren't following rules. You were following your own bias. And now, the whole neighborhood has seen it." The weight of his words landed heavy. Sharon looked around at the circle of eyes surrounding her, realizing the walls were closing in. Her authority, her so-called duty, had evaporated in seconds. And Monica, still shaking, still trying to clear her vision, felt the anger and shame twist into something deeper. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about the message Sharon had sent to everyone watching. But just as the crowd's anger threatened to spiral into chaos, the distant wail of sirens cut through the summer air, signaling that the police were on their way. The sirens grew louder, weaving through the maze of suburban streets until flashing lights finally lit up the pool gate. By then, the crowd had swelled tighter around Monica, shielding her as best they could. A few parents ushered their children out, whispering explanations they knew would raise more questions later. But most stayed, compelled to witness what would happen when authority arrived. 2 officers stepped in, 1 male and 1 female, both scanning the tense scene. The female officer spoke first, her voice clipped but calm. "What happened here?" Half a dozen voices erupted at once. "She sprayed her. Unprovoked. It's all on camera!" Hands shot out, phones angled toward Sharon like glowing spotlights, each holding damning evidence. The male officer raised a hand. "One at a time, please." He glanced at Monica, still sitting on the lounge chair, face wet and blotchy from water. Her towel clung to her lap, shaking slightly as she held it tight. "Ma'am, are you able to talk?" Monica nodded weakly, though her eyes still burned. She coughed. "She attacked me. I was just trying to come in, like I always do. She stopped me, demanded ID, and then—" Monica gestured vaguely toward Sharon, her arm trembling. "She sprayed me. For nothing." The female officer crouched beside her, lowering her tone. "We'll make sure you get medical attention. You don't have to push through the pain." She turned her head toward the crowd. "Did anyone see the incident clearly?" Dozens of hands went up. Sharon, clutching her bag like a lifeline, finally broke her silence. "They're exaggerating. I'm on the HOA board. I was enforcing rules. She refused to show proof of address. I warned her multiple times." The male officer's eyes narrowed. "You pepper-sprayed her over an HOA rule?" Sharon bristled. "She was trespassing." "No," a man from the shallow end barked. "She wasn't. She lives here. Everyone knows she lives here." A woman's voice cut through next. "She kept telling Sharon." Over and over. But Sharon wouldn't listen. The female officer straightened, her patience thinning. "Ma'am," she said firmly to Sharon, "do you have any proof she was trespassing?" Sharon's jaw tightened. "No." "But I know what I saw." "What you saw," the male officer replied sharply, "was a neighbor using her community pool, and instead of contacting management or security, you escalated to assault." The words landed like a hammer. The crowd murmured approval, some nodding, others whispering. "Finally." Monica shifted in her seat, her breathing still uneven. She whispered to the woman helping her, "I can't believe this. I can't believe this actually happened." The woman squeezed her shoulder. "You're not alone. We've all seen her pull this before, but now everyone's watching." The officers asked for witnesses to step forward. Immediately, 3 different neighbors offered their phones, each with clear footage of the moment Sharon raised the canister and sprayed. The female officer examined one, her face stiffening at the undeniable evidence. Meanwhile, Sharon grew more frantic. "You don't understand. If people like her just walk in unchecked, it puts everyone at risk. I was protecting families." That sentence snapped something in the air. The crowd erupted in boos and shouts. "Are you serious? You've got nerve." "Protecting families from what? She's a mom herself." Monica's voice, though raspy, cut through the noise. "From me? You were protecting them from me?" The rawness in her tone silenced even the loudest voices. Sharon opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted around, searching for someone, anyone, to support her. But the crowd had shifted. Even those who once quietly tolerated Sharon's confrontational style now stood with arms crossed, lips pressed tight, no longer willing to shield her. The female officer turned to her partner. "Call paramedics for her," she said, nodding toward Monica. Then, facing Sharon, "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us." Sharon recoiled. "Arrest? For doing my duty?" The male officer pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "For assault," he clarified. "Your duty doesn't excuse breaking the law." Gasps rippled across the pool as Sharon's arms were gently pulled behind her. The clink of metal echoed like punctuation in the summer air. Children peeked from behind their parents' legs, wide-eyed, while adults whispered fiercely among themselves. Monica leaned back, closing her swollen eyes. For the first time since walking through the gate, she felt a hint of relief. Not because justice had been fully served, she knew it was only beginning, but because the community had seen Sharon for what she truly was. Still, the burn in her eyes wasn't the only pain she carried. Humiliation lingered, heavier than the summer heat. But the real shock came later that evening, when another figure entered the picture, one who carried the weight of a uniform and a voice that could no longer be ignored. By the time the paramedics arrived, Monica's eyes were still red and swollen, though the sting had dulled into a deep, persistent ache. They guided her onto a stretcher for a quick exam right there on the pool deck, while neighbors hovered nearby, murmuring support. The crowd was no longer scattered vacationers and kids enjoying a summer Saturday. It had transformed into witnesses, allies, and accidental journalists, each one ready to share what they'd seen. Sharon, cuffed and sitting on the curb by the entrance, muttered angrily under her breath. Her once confident stance had shriveled into something defensive and bitter, though she tried to mask it with defiance. "This is ridiculous." "I was protecting the community," she repeated for the 5th or 6th time, as though saying it enough would make it true. The officers ignored her, jotting down notes while witnesses recounted the sequence of events. And then, from just beyond the flashing red and blue lights, a figure appeared that shifted the entire mood of the crowd. A tall black man in fatigues stepped through the pool gate, his posture rigid, his boots worn but polished. His uniform still carried the dust of travel, the name patch on his chest reading Reed. He had just returned from deployment at Fort Hood earlier that week, and hadn't expected his first weekend back home to be interrupted by a neighbor's phone call that left his blood running cold. "Where is she?" his voice boomed, steady but sharp. Heads turned instantly, parting almost instinctively as he moved forward. Monica, lying on the stretcher with a damp towel pressed gently against her face, turned at the sound. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Anthony." He was at her side in seconds, crouching low, his calloused hand brushing hers. "Baby, I'm here. What happened?" Monica swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. She sprayed me," said I didn't belong here. Anthony's jaw flexed, his eyes narrowing toward the cuffed woman at the curb. He rose slowly, his frame casting a long shadow over the pool deck. Every step he took toward Sharon was deliberate, measured, carrying the weight of months spent overseas where threats were real and commands meant survival. Sharon lifted her chin, trying to regain composure. "I was just doing my job." "People sneak into this pool all the time." Anthony's voice cut through her excuse like steel. "You attacked my wife. In front of our neighbors. In our own community." The crowd fell silent, the only sound the faint squawk of a police radio. The authority in his tone wasn't just the authority of a husband. It was the authority of a soldier, a man who had put his life on the line for a country where his wife still couldn't walk into a pool without being treated like an outsider. One officer stepped between them, hand raised slightly. "Sir, I understand you're upset, but we need to let the process work." Anthony didn't take his eyes off Sharon. "I'm not here to interfere with your job. I'm here to make sure you understand what she just did." He turned back toward the officer. "She humiliated my wife. She put her hands on her with a weapon. That's not an HOA dispute. That's assault." The officer nodded. "We've got witness statements and video evidence. She'll be charged." Sharon scoffed. "Charged? For keeping the neighborhood safe?" Anthony's head snapped back toward her, his voice dropping low enough to send chills through the crowd. "Safe from what? A mother who pays her dues like everyone else? The only threat here is your arrogance." The sting of his words drew murmurs of approval. One neighbor clapped softly. Another said under their breath, "About time someone said it." Monica, still lying back but listening closely, felt tears well that had nothing to do with the pepper spray. For once, she wasn't the one who had to defend her existence. Her husband's presence shifted the weight off her shoulders, if only for a moment. The female officer approached Anthony carefully. "Lieutenant Reed, correct?" He gave a small nod. "I want you to know your wife is being taken care of. And the suspect," she glanced briefly at Sharon, "will be processed accordingly. We appreciate your cooperation." Anthony exhaled slowly, his anger contained but simmering beneath the surface. "I just came home. I thought I'd be fighting to adjust back to normal life, I didn't think I'd be fighting this battle in my own neighborhood." That sentence carried through the crowd like a sermon. Several heads bowed slightly, neighbors suddenly ashamed at the times they'd ignored Sharon's petty confrontations in the past. The silence wasn't just respect, it was recognition. Monica reached out her hand and Anthony immediately took it, grounding her as the paramedics prepared to wheel her toward the ambulance. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Don't let them forget this." Anthony squeezed her hand firmly. "They won't." Not this time. Sharon shifted uncomfortably, trying to avert her eyes, but it was too late. The cameras were still rolling, and the soldier's words were already carving a story larger than the poolside incident itself. But what neither Sharon nor the neighbors realized was that the real storm hadn't even started. The moment those videos hit the internet, everything would change. By the time the ambulance pulled away, carrying Monica to the emergency room for a more thorough check, half the neighborhood had already uploaded their videos. The footage spread faster than anyone at the pool could have imagined. Within hours, clips of Sharon spraying Monica appeared on Facebook community groups, Instagram reels, and TikTok feeds, each one drawing hundreds, then thousands of comments. It wasn't just the act itself that captured people's attention, it was the context. The way Sharon demanded proof of address. The way Monica calmly asserted she lived there. The moment Sharon slipped with "you people" before raising the spray. And then, most dramatically, the arrival of Monica's husband in uniform, standing tall and unyielding in the middle of it all. On Twitter, hashtags started trending locally. Hashtag poolside assault and hashtag HOA abuse. By the next morning, those tags had gone national. News outlets clipped the clearest angles of the confrontation and ran them on loop, anchors describing it as another troubling example of profiling and neighborhood harassment. At the heart of the story were two images. Monica, face streaked with water and pain, repeating, "I live here." And Anthony, uniform still dusty from his deployment, staring down the woman who had humiliated his wife. Together, those images became a kind of shorthand for injustice and resilience. In Plano, the community reeled from the sudden attention. Parents who had been at the pool found their phones blowing up with interview requests. One teenager's shaky video surpassed 1 million views overnight. Strangers messaged Monica on Facebook, offering support and outrage. Even those who had never spoken to her before now felt compelled to stand by her. Anthony sat at their kitchen table that Sunday morning, scrolling through endless posts. He read comments aloud to Monica, who sat across from him with sunglasses shielding her still sensitive eyes. "Listen to this one," Anthony said, his tone half amused, half weary. "This woman just came home from work, trying to enjoy a swim, and gets pepper sprayed by the HOA police. Meanwhile, her husband is serving the country. This is beyond disgraceful." He set the phone down, his shoulders sagging. "They get it, but it shouldn't take my uniform for people to see the wrong." Monica sipped her tea slowly, her voice quiet but steady. "I've been telling people that for years. No one listens until they can package it into a headline." Their 12-year-old daughter, Simone, wandered into the kitchen, holding her tablet. "Mom, you're on TikTok," she said softly, placing it on the table. The clip was looping again. Monica standing her ground, Sharon spraying her, and the chaos that followed. The caption read, "She said she lives here. He said she protects it. Guess who got sprayed?" Anthony reached across the table, clicking the screen off. "No more for now, Simone. Your mom needs rest." But it was impossible to rest. Monica's phone buzzed non-stop. Friends, co-workers, even strangers who wanted to check on her. And outside their home, local news vans had started parking along the curb, their reporters eager to capture the story firsthand. Meanwhile, the HOA board scrambled. Emails flew back and forth, some defending Sharon as misguided but loyal, others demanding her immediate resignation. At least 2 board members privately called Monica to apologize, their voices tense with fear of being lumped into Sharon's actions. By Monday morning, the incident had made national morning shows. A split screen showed Sharon being led away in handcuffs on one side, and Anthony in uniform holding Monica's hand on the other. One host remarked, "It's not just about a pool pass. It's about dignity, belonging, and who gets questioned in their own neighborhood." Neighbors began speaking publicly too. Several admitted on camera that they had seen Sharon harass others before, usually people who didn't look like her definition of a resident, but had stayed silent. One elderly man choked up during an interview. "We all saw it, but none of us stopped it until it was too late." That's on us too. For Monica, the attention was overwhelming. She hadn't asked to be the face of a national debate, yet her image was everywhere. She told Anthony one night, her voice heavy with fatigue, "I don't want this to be my story forever. I just want to live." Anthony wrapped his arm around her. "I know, but maybe telling your story makes it easier for the next person. Maybe it makes someone think twice before pulling out pepper spray." The irony was bitter. Sharon had tried to erase Monica's presence, and instead had etched her into a much larger conversation. But as the social media storm grew, the quiet streets of their neighborhood began to shift, revealing fractures in the community itself, fractures that would soon boil over at the HOA meeting. By the end of that week, the normally quiet HOA meeting in the Plano Community Center looked more like a town hall under siege. Rows of folding chairs filled quickly, neighbors who rarely bothered to attend now arriving early, clutching their phones and murmuring in hushed tones. A few brought their teenage children, insisting they see history happening in their own neighborhood. The long oak table at the front held the board members, 4 of them, stiff in their seats. The chairperson, Geraldine Moss, kept tapping her pen against a stack of papers, her face a mask of strained patience. Sharon's seat, of course, was empty. Her arrest and pending charges had left her suspended from all HOA duties, though her name was still on the printed agenda. When Monica walked in with Anthony by her side, the room fell into a charged silence. Neighbors shifted in their seats, some offering sympathetic nods, others avoiding eye contact altogether. The couple chose seats in the second row, Monica still wearing large sunglasses to protect her eyes, Anthony's posture upright and steady, the kind of stance that made people instinctively clear a path. Geraldine cleared her throat. "Let's bring this meeting to order." Her voice was tight, as if she already knew control was slipping. "We're here to discuss community concerns, including the incident at the pool that has gained significant attention." That understatement earned a few scoffs from the back. Immediately a man stood up, holding his phone high. "We all saw it." "It's all over the internet. What more is there to discuss? That woman pepper-sprayed Monica for no reason. She needs to be removed permanently." Applause rippled through half the room. Another voice cut in, sharp, defensive. A middle-aged neighbor named Tom Jarrett raised his hand, then spoke without waiting to be recognized. "Now hold on." Sharon's methods may have been extreme, but she wasn't completely wrong. "We've had problems with non-residents sneaking into the pool. She was just trying to enforce the rules." The room erupted. Boos, groans, muttered curses. One woman near the front shouted back, "Enforcing the rules doesn't mean attacking your neighbors." Monica sat quietly, her hands folded tightly in her lap, but her jaw clenched. She leaned toward Anthony and whispered, "This is exactly why I didn't want to come. They'll try to excuse her." Anthony murmured back, "They can't excuse what the whole world saw." The chairperson raised her voice over the commotion. "Please, one at a time. This meeting is for constructive discussion." But constructive wasn't what people came for. A young mother stood, her toddler balanced on her hip. I was there. My son was swimming when it happened. Do you know how terrifying it is to have him watch a neighbor get sprayed like that? How do I explain that to him? You can't pretend this is just about enforcing rules. Her words drew murmurs of agreement, and a few people clapped. Tom shook his head stubbornly. "Look, Sharon overreacted, I admit that. But we can't just crucify her because the internet wants a villain. HOA rules exist for a reason. You let people break them once, and pretty soon this place falls apart." Monica rose slowly, her voice cutting through the chatter like glass. "So I was the rule breaker. I live here. I pay the same dues you pay. What exactly did I break besides Sharon's sense of control?" The room quieted, all eyes turning to her. She pulled off her sunglasses, revealing the lingering redness around her eyes. Gasps rippled through the room. "I came to swim," Monica continued, her tone steady but trembling at the edges. "I didn't sneak in. I didn't cause trouble." But Sharon decided I didn't belong. And when I stood my ground, she decided the only way to handle me was with pepper spray. Ask yourselves this. If it was you walking through that gate, would she have treated you the same way? No one answered. The silence was louder than any applause. Anthony placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, steadying her. He turned to face the board. I fought overseas so families here could feel safe in their neighborhoods. My wife wasn't safe at her own pool. That's not a rule problem. That's a respect problem. The board shifted uncomfortably. Geraldine finally spoke. Thank you, Mrs. Reed, Mr. Reed. Your concerns are heard. The board will deliberate on Sharon's position. No, someone shouted from the back. We don't need more deliberation. We need action. Remove her now! Cheers rose, others echoing the demand. Yet a small faction, led by Tom, crossed their arms, faces hard. This is mob justice, he muttered. The divide was unmistakable. On one side, neighbors furious and ashamed, ready to oust Sharon and push for change. On the other, a handful clinging to the idea that Sharon had simply gone too far in doing her duty. Monica scanned the room, her chest tight. The meeting wasn't about policy anymore. It was about who people wanted to be as a community. And that battle wasn't going to be settled with one vote. But outside the walls of the community center, pressure was mounting from far beyond Plano, and soon the neighborhood would find its internal conflict exposed to the entire nation. The HOA meeting left the neighborhood buzzing with tension, but for Monica and Anthony, the fallout extended far beyond their block. By the next morning, their mailbox was stuffed with letters, some handwritten, some typed, offering everything from heartfelt apologies to promises of legal support. Neighbors they barely knew dropped off casseroles and bouquets on their porch. Others simply taped notes that read, "We stand with you." But alongside the kindness came the noise. News outlets kept calling. Reporters knocked on the door at odd hours. Producers begged for live interviews. Even national commentators started weighing in, turning the incident into a debate about race, power, and neighborhood policing. Anthony sat at the dining table, flipping through a stack of envelopes. Half these letters say they're ashamed. The other half want us to sue the HOA. Monica, curled on the couch with an ice pack resting against her temple, sighed. I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to swim. He looked up, his eyes softening. I know. But now it's bigger than just us. Their lawyer, Carla Jennings, stopped by that afternoon. A sharp, no-nonsense attorney based out of Dallas, she'd already seen the footage dozens of times. Sitting across from the couple, she folded her hands. The charges against Sharon are straightforward. Assault with a chemical agent. The police have more than enough evidence, and the DA is pursuing it. But you also have grounds for a civil case. Emotional distress, damages, HOA negligence if they fail to act. Monica frowned. I don't want to drag this out in court. I don't want every detail of my life dissected on TV. Carla nodded. I understand. But sometimes pursuing justice isn't about the court of law, it's about the court of public accountability. Right now, the community's watching. So is the country. Anthony leaned forward. If we don't push back, they'll minimize it. They'll say it was just a misunderstanding. Monica's lips trembled. But what about Simone? She's already hearing kids at school whisper about it. I don't want her growing up thinking her mum's pain is just a headline. Carla's voice softened. Then maybe the goal isn't punishment. Maybe it's change. If we go after the HOA, we can push for reforms. Mandatory bias training, stricter rules about board authority. Something that prevents the next Sharon from thinking she's judge and jury at the pool gate. The thought lingered, heavy but hopeful. Meanwhile, Sharon had retained her own lawyer, and word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some residents whispered she was planning to sue the HOA herself, claiming they abandoned her after years of loyal service. Others speculated she'd try to paint herself as the real victim, citing threats and online harassment since the video went viral. At the Reed household, the phone rang again. This time it was Monica's mother from Baton Rouge, her voice trembling over the line. Baby, I saw the news. Are you all right? Monica forced a smile she didn't feel. I'm okay, Mama. Just tired. Her mother's voice cracked. I raised you to be strong, but it breaks me to see you treated like that. You didn't deserve it." After hanging up, Monica sat in silence, staring at the window where neighborhood kids biked past, laughing freely. She whispered to Anthony, "When does life go back to normal?" He placed a hand over hers. "Maybe it doesn't. Maybe this is our new normal, but we'll decide what to do with it." Later that week, the police finalized their report. Sharon faced charges that could carry both fines and possible jail time. The HOA board issued a public statement condemning her actions, but it was met with skepticism. Commenters online mocked it as damage control. Calls for the entire board to resign began circulating, fueled by residents who admitted they'd long seen Sharon's behavior, but said nothing. For Monica, the emotional toll weighed heavier than the legal jargon. Nights were restless. Every creak outside the house made her jolt awake. She replayed the moment at the pool over and over in her head. The demand for ID, the sting of spray, the sound of children screaming. It stuck to her like smoke she couldn't wash away. One evening, Anthony found her sitting on the porch swing, staring at the darkened street. He sat beside her, their shoulders brushing. "You're quiet," he said gently. She exhaled slowly. "I keep thinking about how many times this happens to people who don't have cameras around, who don't have a husband in uniform walking in after." Anthony nodded. "That's why it matters. Because this time, it's on tape. This time, people have to see." They sat together in silence, cicadas buzzing in the background, the air thick with late summer heat. For the first time in days, Monica allowed herself to lean against him, letting his steady presence remind her she wasn't carrying this alone. But as the legal wheels turned and the community argued, the story was still evolving, because the consequences waiting for Sharon would ripple far beyond one suburban pool. The weeks that followed brought a slow but steady unraveling for Sharon. Once known as the neighbor who ran every HOA meeting with an iron grip, she was now a pariah. Her porch, once decorated with seasonal wreaths and neatly trimmed hedges, became a place people avoided. Parents pulled their children closer when passing her house, whispers floating behind cupped hands. Even those who had defended her at the meeting kept their distance, unwilling to tie themselves to her name anymore. Her lawyer made frequent statements to the press, insisting Sharon was misunderstood and that the incident had been blown out of proportion. But the footage was undeniable. No amount of spin could erase the moment she raised that canister and sprayed Monica in front of a pool full of witnesses. The charges against her moved forward. Local TV cameras followed her to the courthouse, capturing the contrast between her stiff, defensive posture and Monica's quiet resilience as she walked in beside Anthony. Outside, protesters held signs, "HOA not equal to police," and "Respect your neighbors." Inside the courtroom, Sharon tried to avoid Monica's gaze, but at one point their eyes met. Monica didn't flinch. She simply held the stare until Sharon looked away. That silent exchange said more than any testimony could. Meanwhile, the HOA faced its own reckoning. Under mounting pressure, Geraldine Moss and 2 other board members resigned. A special election was scheduled, drawing more candidates than the neighborhood had seen in years. For the first time, residents who had once ignored HOA politics now cared deeply about who held power. Signs popped up on lawns with slogans like "Accountability first" and "Community over control." At one candidate forum, a resident named Evelyn Price, a retired teacher who had lived in the community for decades, spoke directly about the pool incident. "We failed, Monica, long before Sharon pulled out that spray. We failed by letting one person intimidate us for years. This election isn't just about replacing a board, it's about deciding what kind of neighbors we want to be." Her words drew thunderous applause. For Monica and Anthony, the transformation was bittersweet. They never wanted to be symbols of change, yet their ordeal had forced a mirror onto the community. Monica was stopped in the grocery store by strangers offering hugs. At church, people lined up after service to tell her they were proud of her strength. But each kind gesture carried the reminder of why it was necessary. One evening, sitting at the dinner table with Simone, the conversation turned serious. "Mom," Simone asked softly, "why did that lady think you didn't live here?" Monica's fork hovered in midair. She glanced at Anthony, who gave her a small nod. Setting the fork down, She reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. Sometimes, people see what they want to see instead of what's real. Sharon didn't see me as her neighbor. She only saw her idea of who belongs. And she was wrong. Simone's eyes dropped to her plate. It's not fair. No, it's not, Monica said, squeezing her hand. But what matters is how we respond. We can't control what people think, but we can show them who we really are. Anthony added quietly. And sometimes, when people finally see the truth, it forces change. The turning point came 2 weeks later when Sharon appeared on a local news interview, trying to salvage her reputation. She sat stiffly in the studio chair, insisting she wasn't racist and that she had only been doing her duty. But when the anchor played the video clip on air, the exact moment Sharon muttered, "You people," the room went silent. Sharon's face blanched, her lips parting as if she could take it back. The next morning, the HOA email list lit up with calls for her permanent removal from the neighborhood. A petition circulated online, gaining thousands of signatures not just from Plano, but across the country. For Monica, it was both vindication and exhaustion. She told Anthony, "I don't care if she stays or leaves. I just want peace. I just want to walk into my own pool without thinking twice." Anthony pulled her close. "Peace isn't given. It's built. And you've built it louder than she ever could tear it down." The neighborhood began to shift tangibly. More neighbors stopped to chat at the mailbox. Families that had once avoided conflict now spoke openly about fairness and inclusion. The HOA bylaws were updated to limit board authority over residents' daily lives. Small steps, but real ones. And while Sharon sat in her house with blinds drawn, Monica and Anthony walked the sidewalks of their community again, not as victims of one incident, but as neighbors who had forced change through courage and persistence. But for Monica, the true conclusion wasn't about Sharon at all. It was about reclaiming her voice and reminding everyone that dignity isn't negotiable, no matter where you live. The story that began at a sunlit pool in Plano did not end with handcuffs or headlines. For Monica Reed, the real ending unfolded quietly, in the day-to-day ways life shifted after the ordeal. She noticed it the first time she returned to the pool, weeks after the attack. She walked in cautiously, Simone skipping at her side, towel flung over one shoulder. A hush swept over the deck when people recognized her. But instead of stares of suspicion, there were nods of acknowledgement, warm smiles, even one man who stood and opened the gate for her without hesitation. Monica's throat tightened, but this time not from pain. This time from the small but powerful sign that something had changed. Sharon was gone. She had sold her house under pressure from mounting legal bills and an unbearable social spotlight. Her absence left a hollow space in the neighborhood, a reminder of how one person's misuse of power could fracture a community. But that same fracture had forced people to rebuild stronger. The HOA now required annual training on respectful engagement, and a resident committee had been formed to review complaints before they spiraled into confrontations. Anthony even volunteered once, wanting to ensure no one else's spouse would be cornered the way his wife had been. At church one Sunday, Monica stood during testimony and finally addressed what had happened. Her voice wavered at first, but steadied as she spoke. "That day at the pool could have broken me. It could have made me stay inside my house, afraid of what would happen if I dared to exist outside someone else's definition of belonging. But I refused to let it. We refused to let it. My family, my neighbors, and even strangers reminded me that silence is what allows injustice to grow. Speaking up, even when it hurts, is how you plant something better." The congregation rose to their feet in applause, but Monica didn't need the standing ovation. She needed only the peace of knowing her voice had carried beyond the chlorine sting, beyond the shame of being targeted, beyond the viral clips. Anthony watched her with quiet pride. Later at home, he told her, "You turned what was meant to humiliate you into something people will learn from. That's bigger than any uniform I wear." Simone chimed in from the couch, smiling shyly. "And now kids at school say my mom's brave." That night, Monica sat on the porch swing again, the summer heat easing into a cooler breeze. She reflected on how quickly a simple afternoon had transformed into a lesson etched into the fabric of her life. Not a lesson she asked for, but one she hoped would ripple outward. The lesson was simple, though costly. Dignity doesn't come from permission slips or HOA boards. It isn't granted by neighbors who decide who looks familiar. It belongs to each person inherently. And the moment someone tries to strip it away, the whole community has a choice. Stand by silently or stand up loudly. Looking back at that day, Monica realized it was never about a pool card. It was about the everyday moments where bias tries to disguise itself as authority, where arrogance masks itself as safety. And it was about the courage it takes to say, no, not today, not me. The neighborhood was not perfect now. Division lingered among a small few who muttered about overreaction or politics. But the majority had learned something important. Ignoring injustice doesn't keep peace. It only delays the storm. Facing it, calling it out, and building something better afterward was the only path forward. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Monica whispered to herself, "We belong, always did, always will." And maybe that was the greatest victory. Not Sharon's charges, not the headlines, not even the policy changes. The victory was reclaiming her sense of belonging and making sure her daughter saw it firsthand. This story isn't just about one family in Plano, Texas. It's about all of us, about the moments where someone's dignity is questioned and the choice each of us has to either look away or stand up. So if you take anything from Monica's story, let it be this. Silence helps no one, but courage, spoken out loud, acted upon, can change more than just one day. It can reshape a community. And if you want more stories that shed light on everyday courage, resilience, and the lessons we can all learn, make sure to subscribe. Because stories like this remind us that fairness isn't optional. It's the foundation of the world we all share.